Welcome to part 2 of Blizzard as announced 9.1.5. We went over in another video, previous video, if you already watched it, or in the next video you will be watching, we already went over the Covenant swapping that Blizzard is planning to add, as well as the Conduit energy being removed. But these are not the only things being planned for 9.1.5. There is quite a few other things that Blizzard is planning. Now, the first thing to point out is that I like this. I like this developer update that Blizzard is tweeting. Now, I am used to seeing this sort of stuff. I've seen this type of developer update a few times, for example, in Dota 2. I've seen this many times in League of Legends. I used to see it in Hearthstone as well. But WoW isn't one for these type of things. This is not a common thing to see a post related to what's about to come in a patch with all the different things that they plan on focusing on. Could this be because of the change of leadership at the top of Blizzard that happened a few weeks ago, trying to turn the page and use a different type and different means of communication with the player base? Who knows? Either way, I enjoy it. The first thing put at the top is Legion Timewalking with Mythic Plus. So the addition and the notion we have on this is very tiny. Delve back into Legion dungeons with Legion Timewalking and take on the challenges within, including access to Legion Mythic Plus dungeons. This event will run for 2 weeks the first time, and then back to a regular 1 week schedule for subsequent bonus events, just like all of the other time walking events. Now, it will be interesting to see if this Mythic Plus time walking, so the first time we have this type of deal, is still going to be in the sense of a time walking event, like the gear is going to be just catch-up gear for alts, so several item levels below what could be considered an upgrade for the endgame content, or since it's Mythic Plus, meaning it has scalable item level depending on the level of the key, if it's going to be on the same level of current Mythic Plus, meaning up to 246 item level upgradable with Valor points, meaning are we going to be able to start targeting Legion trinkets, for example? That could be pretty interesting. I mean, it's not going to be too interesting in the sense that this is going to come like 4 months into the release of Sanctum of Domination, so it's not going to be a drastic change in the power levels of the specs or whatever, so it's not going to change that much, but it's going to be cool to see basically for the first time to be able to have all the expansions worth of gear to be at the same level of the current gear, if it is going to work that way. It is also going to be interesting based on the people who have not played Legion Mythic Plus, or people who have a little bit too much of a nostalgia goggles fetish going on, because for people who don't know or don't remember, Legion Mythic Plus was a last minute thing. Blizzard developed the entirety of the dungeons, the bosses and the trash, their mechanics, their placements in the dungeon, their abilities and their ways to deal with the group, your group, without having Mythic Plus in mind. Mythic Plus was thought of after. This resulted, for the unawares, in a complete clusterfuck of the first expansion of Mythic Plus. Mythic Plus, compared to now, and even compared to BFA, was an absolute joke, which is also the reason why so many people seem to like Legion Mythic Plus. The reason for that is that Legion Mythic Plus was a brain-dead AoE spam. Mobs did not have any way to defend themselves against chain stuns, against chain interrupts. They had barely any, if any, abilities that were uninterruptible, unlike what we have right now in the game. Plenty of abilities, plenty of casts cannot be interrupted, plenty of mobs cannot be pulled, knockbacked, or thrown up in the air or whatever. They're gonna be casting that fucking ability. God wills it and you're not gonna stop it. In Legion, it wasn't like that. In Legion, the meta was pull the entire zone, kite them behind the corner because they have no way to defend themselves against that cheese, and then chain stun them or chain silence them with the Blood Elf racial, which was all the rage back in Legion meta for Mythic Plus. So you're going to be, if you missed on that, you're going to be re-experiencing exactly why Blizzard had to change a lot of things related to Mythic Plus when it comes to how the trash in particular has to work if you want to play fast, basically, in a dungeon. The other thing we have touched on, but there is an addition now worth pointing out, is the Alt Covenant campaign skip. So we have touched on the fact that if you have done the full story on one character, you will not have to do that story on a different one. So you finished your campaign on your main playing Ventir. Now, if you're playing, for example, a different character who is Kyrian, and in 9.1.5 he wants to respec to Ventir, he won't have to do the story, because your main has already done it. This will also grant you all of the renown you would have earned doing that campaign. So it's not like other skips where you lose out, you miss out on the possible rewards. In this case, you do get all of the renown from the campaign story. The extra skip is the one related to the MO. In my 9.1.5 wishlist video, I did point out that quite a few people were asking for this skip, which is gonna come. Now, as you are talking to Morgraine before getting into the portal to go up to Icecrown and start the whole campaign in the Maw, you can simply tell him, no more, thank you very much, and he's gonna send you to Oribos to start the actual campaign without having to go through the Maw. One of the things that I want to mention, however, since I ripped on Blizzard a few times for this idea, trying to maximize the player hours, trying to add all of these cool changes later on in the game after players have sunk some time, right? So you create a problem and then several months later you come with a solution to be praised. In this case, however, we do have to praise the fact that many of these things could have been split in two. So Blizzard could have given you first the change, and later the fact that it was account-wide, later the fact that it also applied to your alts. Basically saying, yeah, you can do this on your main, but on your alt, you still have to grind, you still have to play all of that extra stuff that you cannot skip. Instead, all of these changes related to skips and quality of life additions are being introduced both to your mains and to your alts, i.e. they are all account-wide. Being able to freely swap covenants is going to happen once you reach high renown. Blizzard hasn't given us an actual number, but let's just assume is the max renown you can currently get, which is renown 80. Blizzard could have only made it happen once per character, so all of your characters who want to freely swap covenants need to be renown 80. So they need to continue playing weekly to get that renown weekly before they get to do this. Instead, right from 9.1.5, you will be able to do this on all of your alts, provided one of your characters have gotten to max renown. So it doesn't matter if once the patch launches, your alt is renown 57, he will still be able to freely swap covenants. The same can be said for the story skip. Completing a Covenant campaign on one character will allow alt characters the ability to skip the same Covenant. So that is obviously purely aimed at alts, since you can't complete the same Covenant twice on a character. Obviously, if you complete the Kyrian campaign on your main, all of your alts get to skip that, and now the Maw campaign as well. So at the very least, a lot of these skipping, a lot of these less time wasting on things you don't really want to do too much, really, you would rather just jump straight into Mythic Plus or jump straight into PvP or whatever you want to do at the end game, is going to be faster on all of your characters, not just your main. The other addition we have little knowledge about is legendary item recycling. This is something that has become kind of necessary given the additions that Blizzard put into the game, because first you had different legendaries. Old legendaries got nerfed, so you stopped using them. Old legendaries got buffed, so you had to start crafting them. Then you had Covenant-specific legendaries being added into the game, and to many specs, those are very good, so you have to start crafting them. And then Blizzard added Shards of Domination being put into certain sockets, which cock-blocked your legendary slot. So in some cases, you also had to recraft a legendary because it was in the same slot of a Shard of Domination. In my case, for example, I have 5 legendaries, ranging from 190 to 235, which I've left behind in my bank because I just can't use them anymore. So this is a pretty welcome system, if anything, just to stop myself from being triggered whenever I open my bank and I see those legendaries just lying there for no reason. Now you can at least recycle them. We don't know anything about what exactly are you getting from the recycling. A percentage of the soul ash and a percentage of the soul cinders spent on crafting it would be my first guess, as well as a percentage of the materials, perhaps of the Korthite as well, is, the logical thing you would be guessing when recycling the item. It's not a very game-breaking type of addition, but it's a welcome one. Before going to the last of the announcements, the last of the planned changes for 9.1.5, I wanted to touch on their announcement, their manifesto. they pulled out for this patch. So in this entire wall of text, they go over pointing out the changes and then they explain their reasoning. We already talked about their reasoning for the Covenant swap, right? Their misguided idea that role-playing was very interesting, that they wanted to bring the RPG back into the MMORPG genre, that they wanted to make it more important to choose a single covenant, that we all know it's just bullshit. There were likely other, secondary reasons as to why you wanted to be locked into a single covenant, likely related to playing times, player engagement, and this type of data they can use to tell everyone there is tons of people playing the game. I still don't believe it's a legitimate idea that locking you in a single covenant totally makes it more valuable, more special or something. I wanted to look at the other explanations, because after this explanation for the Covenant swap, they point out Conduit Energy, so this entire abomination, however, is a different story. The system simply has not played out the way we hoped it would. We should have heeded community feedback and taken a different direction a year ago. A majority of players largely ignore the system and are unaffected by it, while the minority who want to engage in multiple content types or multiple specs at the same time feel constrained by it. Overall, that adds up to a negative experience. Conduit Energy isn't really making up the game better in any appreciable way. So we are removing the system entirely. Okay, great. They are doing a mea culpa. They are bowing their head, pouring some ashes on their forehead, asking for forgiveness. Fine. What sort of clashes with the statement is saying the system has not played out the way we hoped. Conduit Energy isn't making the game better in any appreciable way. How were they planning to make Conduit Energy work in a way which would have made the game better in any appreciable way? I just struggle to see any possible way in which Conduit Energy would have been a cool system to use. It is still such a bizarre addition to me in the game, and I'm not even that angry about it. I'm not that angry about it because all of the specs I've been playing so far have only been playing without the need to use Conduit Energy that much. So I'm not even that triggered about it, and I still can't wrap my head around what was the end game for Conduit Energy. Because even if you have your tinfoil hat on, even if you have the idea that, Blizzard was planning another one of these slimy schemes to get you to play more. This is yet another one of those player engagement, retaining player and player time schemes to get the players to sink more time into the game. In this case, it doesn't even work like that because Conduit Energy wasn't grindable. There was nothing in the game that pushed you to go and do more dailies or go and do more world quests to give you Conduit Energy. Once you unlocked all of your conduits and you couldn't get upgrades anymore, you weren't getting any more energy by yourself, so there was nothing to grind for Conduit Energy. It was just an arbitrary system locking you behind being able to spec your character however you wanted it. So that's just very confusing. The other part I wanted to look at in the announcement was their thought process behind the Covenant campaign skip and, the Mo skip, all of these skips for alts, as well as the ability to freely swap between covenants. They are saying these changes are one outgrowth of many ongoing discussions within the development team, focused on feedback that at times players feel that the WoW content they most enjoy is locked behind experiences that aren't nearly as appealing to them, and some of that feedback revolves around different playstyles and content types. For example, I like to do Mythic Plus. Why do I have to dunk 40 hours to go from Ventir to Kyrian if I just wanted to go and play Kyrian in Mythic Plus? What benefit is it going to do having me grind campaign story quests, killing mobs in the open world that I've killed 50 times over when I could be in Mythic Plus instead? Maybe the end result is that when I do the entire grind, I get to log 40 more hours into the game. I will get more engagement metric levels because I played more, but I will be more frustrated with the game. The more this keeps on, the higher the chances are that I'm gonna stop playing, that eventually I'm gonna say fuck this shit because of the frustration that keeps building up, as opposed to if I could just start playing a different covenant without any of that grind. They then continue saying, but a consistent theme is that experiences that were fun the first time through start to lose their luster on repeat playthroughs on alts, especially when required for power progression. Yes, no shit. If you wanted to simply change Covenant, not because you like the fairies of the Night Fae, not because you liked the campaign of the Ventir, or because you thought the Kyrian were super cool and you wanted to join Uther's Covenant, but the only reason you did is because someone who knows numbers published some sims and told you that Necrolord is now 6% DPS above Kyrian in Mythic Plus, therefore you want to go Necrolord for Mythic Plus, you have in front of you 40 hours of campaign storyline and renown grinding before you get to do what you wanted to do. So just as the Threads of Fate system exists to allow players to skip the level up zone narrative on subsequent playthroughs, we want to give max level players a similar option to avoid having to replay a Covenant campaign they already done. Good. This is now putting you in a situation where you have a lot of skips for you, because imagine you start as a fresh character that you didn't touch since the release of Shadowlands. You were at max level in BFA and that's it. You can talk to more Grain and skip the entire Mo storyline. You jump into Oribos and you get the option to go either to the normal questing or the Threads of Fate. You don't care about the normal questing anymore. You have done this before multiple times, so you choose Threads of Fate. You just spam dungeons without having to do any of the story. You hit max level. Because your main already went through the Kyrian campaign, you get to skip the entirety of the Kyrian campaign. You get your first big jump in renown, because you get all of the renown you would have gotten from the campaign storyline. Because your main also did all of the Mo questline prior to 9.1, you also get the option to skip all of that. Because your main also did all of the Torghast campaign all the way up to the unlocking of the Twisting Corridors, you also get to skip all of that, and you get to jump immediately into the first quests of 9.1, the first campaign quest of 9.1. So effectively, all you have to do on a new character, on an alt character, in terms of how to catch up to the most current content, is log in, click a bunch of dialogue options to skip, farm dungeons or farm time walking, farm whatever gets you to max level the fastest, click more dialogue options, and then you're jumping into 9.1 content immediately. So it is very fast. It is actually a faster set of skips that we have gotten in previous expansions compared to previous expansions, and it's coming even earlier than what would happen in previous expansions. Usually this type of skip would happen in a 0.2 patch, and it would be less of a skip than what we're getting now. So they are increasing the amount of time you have to play the game the way you want, compared to having to play the game grinding and farming and doing chores that you're supposed to do to catch up to the most current content, which is good. Lastly, finally, we can close with the last of the additions, which is talent and ability buffs. Now, I am not an expert, but I am going to tell you quite certainly that this is some PR work on this statement, because actually the full planned additions for 9.1.5 are talent and ability buffs and nerfs. Probably they brainstormed how to present what they were planning for, and they thought, maybe don't tell them we're gonna nerf them, just point out the buffs, because yeah, of course nerfs are also gonna come. What I actually wanted to point out, besides the inclusion of nerfs, is that they are specifying talent and ability. If you look back at all of the recent changes we have gotten, the vast majority of them have been legendary changes. They have been Conduit changes, and they have been Covenant changes. Sometimes the ability, sometimes the soul binds, even recently with the Covenant specific legendaries. All of that was centered around external, third-party borrowed powers, not really as much to your core of your class or your spec. So we have gotten a few changes in 9.1, for example, the nerfs to Balanced Druid being one of them, but many of the others were related to borrowed powers. So I do think it's better for you to get your core abilities and talent choices being given extra options, variety, diversity, and whatnot, as opposed to yet another change to one of your legendaries, for example. So it certainly looks better. And also what was expected. 0.5 patches, mid-tier patches are usually what are going to be used for pushing in some balance tuning, as was pointed out already, so it's good to know it's in the works. There are going to be other things coming out. I will leave behind the link for both of the official content update preview on their official site, as well as the Shadowlands development update they have pulled out. There are a few other additions like more travel points in the MO, remote anima turn-ins, transmogrification linking in chat, alt leveling improvements, and a few other slew of additions. With this, we have gone over all of the changes they plan to implement in 9.1.5. We have talked already about the allied race customizations that they are planning to push as well. In the next following days, for sure, they are going to continue adding and releasing new information about this. The next week, there is going to be the patch on the PTR available, so we will get to see it there as well. For now, we can stop here. Let me guys know which one of these changes do you think is more exciting, besides the fact that, as pointed out, you can now freely swap between covenants in 9.1.5. Thank you guys anyways for watching the video. If you want to support the channel, do the usual stuff. Thank you very much. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, however, I am still hoping on additional Ghost Wall forms. Blizzard, it's time.